The first rule is that I never hunt alone, even though I am always by myself. That sounds like a contradiction, but if you have spent enough nights in the Nevada desert, you learn quickly that solitude does not mean you are unaccompanied. I learned that lesson during my first contract when I still believed skinwalkers were stories invented to scare tourists away from tribal land. Back then, I thought my job was simple tracking and pest control for ranchers who paid well and asked few questions. The desert cured me of that arrogance fast. It taught me that some things watch quietly, patiently, and with an intelligence that feels almost human. When the wind dies and the stars feel too close, you understand that rules exist for a reason. My work officially falls under wildlife management, which is a lie everyone involved pretends to believe. The state issues permits, the ranchers report livestock losses, and I file paperwork full of bland language about predators and environmental balance. Unofficially, I'm called when something walks wrong, when tracks change shape halfway across dry earth, when animals die without being eaten. Nevada is perfect for this kind of work because the land is vast and empty, and people are used to pretending they see nothing. Towns survive by minding their own business, and that silence keeps everyone breathing. The second rule is that I never chase. If something wants me to follow it, I stop immediately. Skinwalkers are predators that understand curiosity better than hunger. They know humans are wired to investigate, to prove we are brave, to believe we are in control. The desert helps them by stretching distances and warping sound. A scream can come from everywhere and nowhere. And by the time you realize you are walking toward it, you are already too far from safety. I learned this rule the night I followed a crying voice that sounded exactly like my younger sister. She was asleep 300 miles away, and whatever made that sound knew her name. I carry a rifle, but it is not my primary defense. The third rule is that weapons are tools, not solutions. Bullets can slow a skinwalker, injure it, even anger it, but they rarely end things cleanly. What matters more is preparation, boundaries, and respect. Before every hunt, I mark a perimeter with white ash mixed with salt and sage. It smells sharp and clean, and it makes my eyes sting. The ritual matters because it reminds me that I am stepping into someone else's territory. The desert does not belong to me, and neither do the things that live beneath its skin. The call that started this particular job came from a rancher outside Tonopah. He sounded exhausted, the way men do when sleep has abandoned them for weeks. His cattle were dying in pieces, scattered across miles, arranged almost carefully. Coyotes had been blamed at first, then mountain lions, but the tracks told a different story. Hooves became hands, prints circled back on themselves, fences were climbed, not broken. The sheriff had stopped returning his calls, which was confirmation enough. The fourth rule is that I always arrive before sunset. Darkness belongs to them. In daylight, skinwalkers hide behind distance and stillness. At night, they move. I parked my truck near a dry wash and walked the rest of the way, counting my steps, memorizing landmarks. The desert looks the same until it doesn't, and getting lost is easier than people think. Heat warps perception, and fear finishes the job. I felt it watching me before I saw anything. That pressure between the shoulder blades, the sense of being evaluated. The fifth rule is that when that feeling starts, I do not acknowledge it. No sudden movements, no searching the horizon. Predators read intention. I set up my perimeter calmly, hands steady, breath slow. Only when the ash line was complete did I look up. Something stood on a ridge a quarter-mile away. At first glance, it looked like a coyote, tall and thin. Then it stood taller, joints bent the wrong way, its head tilted as if listening to thoughts rather than sound. The air felt heavier, like a storm waiting to break. I remember the sixth rule then, the one that matters most. Never speak your own name out loud. Out here, names are invitations, and some things are very eager to RSVP. The creature opened its mouth, and my voice came out of it, calm and friendly, asking me for help. I raised my rifle, not to fire, but to remind myself that fear does not get to decide my actions. The desert went quiet, and in that silence, I waited. Because waiting is how you survive. The thing on the ridge did not move for a long time, and neither did I. Skinwalkers test patience the way gamblers test tills. They wait for boredom, for doubt, for the moment you convince yourself nothing is there. The seventh rule is that time stretches differently around them, and impatience is a weakness they exploit mercilessly. I lowered myself to sit inside the perimeter, back straight, rifle resting across my knees. I focused on my breathing, slow and even, counting heartbeats instead of seconds. The desert sun slid lower, painting the rocks in red and gold, and still it watched. When it finally moved, it did so casually, like a neighbor strolling across a yard. It descended the ridge with long, uneven steps, shifting shape as it walked. One moment, it wore the outline of a man, shoulders hunched, arms swinging. The next, it dropped into something lower, broader, fur rippling where skin should have been. Watching it change was like watching a lie correct itself. Every form was wrong, but each was confident. That confidence is how they get close. The eighth rule is never assume there is only one. I scanned the horizon slowly, resisting the urge to turn my head too fast. Heat shimmered off the ground, and shadows pooled in the low places. That was when I saw movement to my left, then my right. Smaller shapes, faster, circling wide. Juveniles, or imitators, or something else entirely. Skinwalkers do not hunt in packs the way wolves do, but they cooperate when it suits them. Curiosity draws them together. So does opportunity. The rancher had mentioned hearing voices near his house at night. His wife's voice, calling him outside. His dead father's voice, telling him to open the door. That detail mattered. The ninth rule is that skinwalkers use familiarity as a blade. They cut you open with memory, not teeth. I had prepared recordings on my phone, old voicemails from people I loved, reminders that I could not trust what I heard. I did not play them yet. There was a right moment for everything, and timing keeps you alive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath fogged faintly in the cooling air. The perimeter line glowed pale in the half-light, a fragile boundary against a very old hunger. The main shape stopped just short of it, toes curling at the edge, sniffing. It smiled with my mouth again. "You're tired," it said, sounding exactly like me after a long drive. "You can rest. We'll keep watch." The 10th rule is that bargains are always offered before violence. Skinwalkers are transactional creatures. They respect exchange, even if their idea of fairness is twisted. I did not respond. Silence is its own language. The smaller shapes crept closer, testing angles, peering through scrub and stone. One of them tried to step across the line and recoiled sharply, hissing. The ash works, but only temporarily. Boundaries erode, physically and otherwise. I reached into my pack and pulled out the mirror. Small and cracked, edges wrapped in cloth. The 11th rule is never let them see themselves unfiltered. Reflection confuses them. Identity is fluid for a creature that steals shapes, and a mirror forces questions they do not like to answer. I angled it toward the main shape. For a split second, its movement stuttered. Its face rippled, features sliding like wet paint. The smile vanished, replaced by something raw and angry. That was when it screamed. Not a human scream, not an animal one, but a sound that vibrated in my teeth and bones. The smaller shapes echoed it, a chorus of wrongness that rolled across the desert. I felt it press against my thoughts, trying to push panic into the gaps. The 12th rule is that fear is a door. I closed it by grounding myself in sensation. The grit under my boots, the weight of the rifle, the smell of sage and ash. The main shape lunged forward, stopping inches from the line. Its claws dug furrows in the dirt, scraping, testing. "You don't belong here," it said, using my mother's voice this time, soft and disappointed. I almost laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. They dig deep, but they do not understand context. They know the sounds, not the history behind them. I raised the rifle and fired. Not at it, but into the ground just beyond the perimeter. The shot cracked the air, startling birds from nowhere. The 13th rule is that sometimes noise is necessary. The report broke the rhythm, disrupted whatever pattern they were building. The smaller shapes scattered, retreating into shadow. The main one stepped back, reassessing, eyes reflecting the last light like dull coins. It spoke again, words slurring, shapes bleeding together. "We can help each other," it said. "We always do." That was the most honest thing it had said all night, and that honesty chilled me more than the lies. The desert did not return to normal after the shot. It never does. Sound lingers out here, bouncing off stone and scrub, stretching until it becomes something else. The echoes faded slowly, and in that drawn-out quiet, I felt the pressure ease just a little. The main shape withdrew another step, pacing now, circling the perimeter like a bored cat. The 14th rule is that retreat does not mean defeat, it means recalculation. I checked my watch, though timekeeping is more habit than necessity on jobs like this. Night had fully settled in, and the stars burned hard and sharp overhead. That was bad. Skinwalkers prefer darkness, but they love witnesses, and a clear sky gives them confidence. I could hear the smaller shapes moving again, farther out this time, stirring pebbles, brushing against dry grass. They were patient. They could wait longer than I could. They always can. The rancher's land stretched for miles in every direction, fenced but porous, dotted with low hills and abandoned structures. Old mining sheds, rusted equipment, places where things could hide and watch. The 15th rule is never assume you are at the center of the problem. You are just a point in it. Whatever was happening here did not start tonight. And it would not end with me unless I made very deliberate choices. I reached for the bundle wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of my pack. Inside were bones, small and yellowed, etched with symbols that were not mine. I had traded for them years ago, paid in favors and silence. The 16th rule is that borrowed power comes with borrowed consequences. I did not like using them, but liking things is a luxury. I placed the bundle just inside the perimeter, careful not to cross the line myself. The air shifted immediately, heavy with something old and sour. The main shape froze. Its head snapped toward the bundle, nostrils flaring. It knew those bones. Whatever confidence it had been wearing cracked. That told me I was closer to the heart of this than it wanted me to be. Those don't belong to you, it said, voice rougher now, layered with something animal underneath. Put them back. The 17th rule is never argue ownership. Everything out here believes it owns something. I said nothing. I rarely do. Instead, I took out the recorder and pressed play. My sister's voice filled the night, laughing, teasing me about always working too much. It was real, warm, anchored in memory. The effect was immediate. The smaller shapes shrieked, sound thin and furious, retreating farther into the dark. The main shape recoiled as if struck. Authenticity burns them. Truth is corrosive. It changed again, rapidly now, cycling through forms like masks. Man, woman, coyote, something half-finished. Each shift came with a wet sound that made my stomach twist. The perimeter line smoked faintly where its feet brushed too close. The 18th rule is that desperation accelerates mistakes. I watched carefully, cataloging movements, waiting for an opening. That opening came when it tried a different tactic. It stopped moving altogether and simply sat down across from me, legs folding awkwardly beneath it. Its face settled into something almost human, eyes too wide, mouth too still. You don't have to do this, it said, using a voice I didn't recognize. Neutral, professional. We keep the balance here. You break it, and worse things come. That was close enough to the truth to be dangerous. The 19th rule is that systems justify themselves. The rancher's ledger, the missing cattle, the scattered remains, all of it pointed to a pattern. Offerings, maintenance, something being fed so it would not feed freely. Skinwalkers are not apex predators. They are middle managers in a much older hierarchy. Useful, adaptable, expendable. I asked my first question of the night then, keeping my voice flat. How many? It tilted its head, considering. Enough, it said finally. Not a number, but an admission. I nodded, as if that settled something. In a way, it did. I took out the flare next, thumb poised. Fire is crude, but it commands attention. The 20th rule is never reveal your exit until you are ready to use it. I stood slowly, every movement deliberate, eyes never leaving it. The smaller shapes had gone quiet. They were listening. This ends tonight, I said, not as a threat, but as a statement of intent. Intent matters. The main shape laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin. It never ends, it replied. It only changes hands. I struck the flare and threw it not at the creature, but past it, toward the old shed on the far side of the wash. It arced bright and hissing, landing hard against dry wood. Flame bloomed instantly, greedy and loud. The desert hates fire, and everything in it reacts. The main shape turned instinctively, attention torn. That was my moment. I stepped forward and kicked a gap in the perimeter line, breaking my own boundary. The ash scattered, the protection failing, but boundaries are tools, not crutches. The 21st rule is that sometimes you step into danger to redirect it. I grabbed the bundle of bones and hurled them into the fire. The scream that followed was not human, not animal, not anything I had words for. It came from everywhere at once, from the ground and the air and inside my skull. The main shape convulsed, form unraveling, pieces sloughing away into shadow. The smaller shapes fled outright now, panic overriding coordination. The fire roared higher, fed by more than wood. I ran. Running is also a rule, though people pretend it isn't. I ran toward my truck, lungs burning, night tearing at my senses. Behind me, something collapsed with a sound like a mountain sighing. I did not look back. Looking back is how you die. I reached the truck just as the sound behind me changed. The scream faded into something lower, deeper, like pressure releasing underground. The desert trembled, not enough to knock me down, but enough that I felt it through the soles of my boots. I did not turn around. The 22nd rule is that confirmation is a luxury survivors cannot afford. I slammed the door, twisted the key, and the engine roared to life on the second try. I drove with the headlights off for the first mile, letting the dark swallow me the way it always does. When I finally stopped, it was dawn. The sky was pale and exhausted, stretched thin over the horizon. I got out and vomited behind the truck, hands shaking now that the danger had loosened its grip. Adrenaline lies. It tells you that you are fine until it decides you are not. I wiped my mouth, drank water, and waited for my hands to steady. The 23rd rule is that you always wait after. The desert collects its debts slowly. I went back to the ranch at full light, which is never as comforting as people think. Daytime reveals damage more clearly. The old shed was gone, reduced to a blackened scar and a circle of glassed sand. The air still smelled wrong, metallic and sweet. There were no tracks, no bones, no sign of the shapes that had circled me hours earlier. Clean erasures make me nervous. Messy endings are honest. Clean ones mean something else stepped in. The rancher met me by the fence, hat in his hands. He did not ask what happened. People who live out here learn which questions to swallow. I told him his cattle would stop dying, at least for a while, and that he should move his family closer to town if he could. He nodded, eyes tired but relieved. He paid me in cash and eggs and silence. The transaction mattered more than the amount. I filed my report that afternoon. Predators removed, environmental anomaly resolved. The state would close the case and forget it ever existed. They always do. The 24th rule is that paperwork is camouflage. Evil thrives in margins and footnotes. I drove south as the sun climbed, the desert flattening out ahead of me. Somewhere out there, something larger had noticed the disturbance. You do not burn a cog in an ancient machine without drawing attention. That thought sat heavy in my chest, but it was familiar weight. This work leaves marks you cannot see. The final rule is the one I never write down. You do not hunt skinwalkers to end them. You hunt them to keep the balance tilted just enough that people can sleep at night. You step into systems you cannot dismantle and you push, knowing the push will cost you something. Maybe time, maybe memory, maybe a future where the desert feels empty again. As I drove, my phone buzzed once, then went silent. A voicemail notification. I did not check it. Some things are better left unheard, even when you know exactly whose voice it will be. The road stretched on, straight and unforgiving, and I followed it because moving forward is also a rule. The night air had grown colder as I trekked further into the Nevada desert, the moon a thin crescent hanging low in the sky. Every crunch of gravel under my boots sounded deafening. Every rustle of the wind through the sagebrush, a potential signal that I wasn't alone. The rules I had memorized were etched into my mind, repeated to myself like a mantra. Rule 1. Never engage if they outnumber you. Rule 2. Always carry salt and iron. Rule 3. Keep moving. Never stand still. I had lived by these rules for months now, but tonight they felt heavier, like each step forward was a step deeper into something I could never fully comprehend. I reached the edge of a small dry wash where the sand and rock seemed unnaturally churned, as if something large had passed through recently. My heart thudded against my rib cage, and I crouched low to inspect the ground. The footprints were elongated and uneven, not human, but not entirely animal either. A shiver ran down my spine. I knew this was the path of a skinwalker. The wind shifted, and I caught a faint metallic scent mixed with something rotten. I recognized it immediately, the stench of a hunted animal, or worse, a warning left behind by the skinwalker itself. I whispered to myself, almost as if speaking aloud would keep me sane. Stay calm. Follow the rules. I reached into my pack and felt the smooth weight of the iron blade I always carried. The one the old tracker in Tonopah had sworn would keep the creatures at bay. My fingers closed around it like a lifeline. In the darkness ahead, shadows moved in ways that defied physics, shapes darting and twisting among the rocks. I had to remind myself, panic was my enemy. If they sensed fear, they would come for me faster than any human could imagine. Rule 4 hit me suddenly. Never chase, never provoke. I had learned this the hard way, back when I first began my hunts. The first skinwalker encounter had been near an abandoned mine. I had ignored the old man's advice to watch and wait, and I had paid the price. That night, I had barely escaped with scratches across my back and memories that would haunt my dreams. The thing I saw then, the way it imitated human movement but with a grotesque loping quality, was something that defied explanation. Now, I was older, smarter, and the rules weren't just suggestions. They were survival. I took a deep breath, letting the dry desert air fill my lungs, and continued along the wash. The footprints became more numerous, spreading in a fan pattern, as if the creature had been tracking multiple prey or warning them off. I paused at a cluster of rocks and listened. The desert was silent except for the whisper of the wind, but there was a subtle rhythm, almost like breathing. I could feel it more than hear it, a presence that pressed against the edge of my awareness. My hand tightened around the iron blade, knuckles white. Rule 5. Always have a retreat. I needed a place to fall back if the creature decided to attack. I scanned the landscape and spotted an old, hollowed-out Joshua tree. Not ideal for a fight, but good enough for a temporary refuge. I made my way toward it, moving slowly, deliberately, careful not to make a sound. My shadows stretched long across the sand, and for a moment, I swore it flickered independently, like a mirror image of me that wasn't entirely aligned. I shook my head, dismissing the thought. Stress can do strange things to your perception. It could just be the moonlight. It had to be. Once inside the hollow of the tree, I crouched low, trying to blend with the darkness. I had my knife ready, my pack open with salt at the ready, and my senses stretched to the breaking point. Hours seemed to pass like minutes, and then I heard it. A soft scraping sound, almost like claws across stone. My breath hitched. Rule 6: never let them hear you breathe. I forced myself to slow, to control the rapid rise and fall of my chest. The sound came again, closer this time, and then stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, as if the air itself is pressing in. I peered out through a gap in the tree, and that's when I saw it, standing just beyond the wash, its eyes glinting like coals. A shape that shifted between wolf and man, something that no human should be able to exist. Its head tilted unnaturally, and for a moment, I swore it grinned. I didn't move. I couldn't. My training told me that any sudden motion would draw it in. The creature didn't approach, didn't retreat. It just stood there, observing, like it knew I was there and was deciding what I was worth. Time seemed meaningless as I sat frozen, feeling the weight of 1,000 rules in my mind. Then I remembered Rule 7. Always make them think you are nothing. I lowered my head, making myself small, whispering prayers I didn't even believe in. The creature watched for a long moment and then, without warning, disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the faintest echo of a howl that made my teeth ache. My legs were numb, my body trembling, but I knew I had survived this encounter, not because of bravery, but because I had followed the rules. I waited for hours, moving only when I was certain it was gone. As dawn broke over the desert, painting the sand with orange and pink, I realized I had learned something new. Skinwalkers weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent, cunning, and patient. They observed, they learned, and they remembered. Every encounter was a test, and every test left marks on the hunter. Some visible, some not. I had survived, yes, but I felt the weight of it in my chest. A quiet dread that this was only the beginning of something far larger than me. When I finally made it back to my vehicle, parked a few miles from the wash, I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. The desert was waking up, the heat beginning to creep into the sand. But I knew the creatures didn't sleep like humans did. I loaded my gear, double-checked my knives, and made a mental note of the tracks to follow next time. Nevada was vast, and the rules were my only compass. Rule 8. Always remember the rules, even when you think you understand them. The Skinwalkers were out there always, watching, waiting, and learning just as I was. And if I ever let my guard down, if I ever thought I had outsmarted them, that would be the night I disappeared into the desert, never to be seen again. Driving back along the desolate highway, I felt the tension slowly ebb from my muscles, replaced by a hollow sense of purpose. Each hunt left me changed, hardened, and more aware of the fragile line between life and the unknown. Nevada was a strange, beautiful, terrifying place. A land where shadows moved with a mind of their own, and where one wrong step could be your last. The Skinwalkers were part of that wilderness. Predators older than any story. Creatures that existed at the edge of human understanding. And I was out there to find them, to face them, and to follow the rules that might keep me alive just a little bit longer.